Okay, welcome back. Welcome back. As I had promised, big drum roll for Dr. Artemis Simopoulos. Good evening, Dr. Simopoulos. How are you?
Very well, very well. Very pleased to be with you.
I am so excited that you are with us this evening. So excited. Dr. Simopoulos is the world's leading researcher on omega fatty acids and has authored seminal scientific studies on dietary fats, inflammation, and chronic disease. She is from Greece and is known as the pioneer, also the godmother of the research of the fatty acid omega-3 and 6 studies. She's the author, and a lot of you folks out there have heard this. It's called the Omega Diet. In fact, I brought the book with me. Famous book. A lot of people have read this book. She is the author of the Omega Diet, based on the island of Crete, which we're going to be getting into here in a bit. It is a large island in Greece in the Mediterranean Sea, and that's where it all began. The population of Crete had the lowest rate of cardiovascular disease and cancer despite a high-fat diet. She's a keynote speaker worldwide, and her research spans several decades. She began in 1968, born in Greece, medical degree from Boston University, certified by the American Board of Pediatrics. She's also a member of the Society for Pediatric Research, the Endocrine Society, the American Institute of Nutrition, also the American Society for Clinical Nutrition and the American College of Nutrition, the North American Association for the Study of Obesity, also the ISSFL and the ISNN, which is the Society of Nutrigenetics and Nutrigenomics, and the American Society of Human Genetics, which she established that in 2005. She's a physician and an endocrinologist. She has studied and conducted research at the NIH, focusing on nutritional aspects and the evolutionary, and this is where it gets really exciting, and I can't wait to talk about it, the evolutionary aspects and where we came from of diet and fatty acids, and the importance, and I'm going to slow down here, the importance of maintaining a balanced omega-6 and 3 fatty acid ratio for your health, disease, prevention, and development. She has actually chaired the nutrition at the NIH, and she's recognized globally as an authority on essential fatty acids and has served as the nutritional advisor to the Consumer Affairs at the White House. She has been a member of several White House delegations to the World Health Organization and the Food and Agriculture Organization. And she's, again, keynote speaker worldwide. She established the actual ISSFAL, which is the International Society for the Study of Fatty Acids and Lipids. That was established in 1991, has over 300 members, and she actually ran that for the first 7 years. She's the founder of the CGNH, which is the Center for Genetics, Nutrition, and Health. That is in Washington, D.C., and she's currently a member of the Hellenic Institute for Health Longevity, which was just established, headquartered in Athens, Greece, and she was born in Greece. And again, that was, I tell you what, I am so privileged, and I can't tell you how proud and how happy I am that you are with us on this show. And what an honor it is to have you right in front of me as the godmother of the fatty acid omega-3 and 6 ratio, and how critical that is to our health. And, you know, sadly, what has happened to that ratio over the last however many decades, and what our industrial diet has done to that, and the reason why we have so many chronic diseases. And my audience knows how much I talk about this. I've been talking about this for about a year. So this is definitely my passion. And Dr. Simopoulos, I want you to tell the audience how it all began when you were looking at this island of Crete.
All right. Well, you know, I was working in the intramural program of the NIH in the endocrinology branch of the Heart Institute. And I was doing research looking specifically at fatty acids and their metabolism and how they affect growth in children. That's how it started. During that time, it was the time when all the emphasis for heart disease was on cholesterol, and they did not look for any other nutritional factors. So they put all the emphasis on saturated fat and cholesterol. But we had very good evidence from our studies and other people's studies that what is very important in the development of heart disease is inflammation. And inflammation is at the base of most of the chronic diseases. So while I was at the NIH, there was a movement for manipulating the whole field of nutrition. And so Dr. Leaf, who was professor of preventive medicine at Harvard, called me up and said, we need to set up a conference to evaluate and look specifically at the essential fatty acids, namely omega-6 and omega-3, and their ratio. Because people are not looking at it, and yet there is very good evidence from animal studies and some epidemiologic studies that we really need to have a good group of people that have done research in the area, understand metabolism, and try to understand why there is so much obesity and heart disease. And that was 40 years ago. We set up the conference.
Wow.
On June of 1985. Can you believe that? 40 years ago, we had enough evidence to show the importance of a balanced ratio in terms of inflammation and in terms of obesity and in terms of growth and development in children, because mother's milk has the omega-3 fatty acids, DHA, which is very important for the development of the fetus and the newborn. Yet at that time, the infant formula did not contain DHA, so the babies who were formula fed at that time, they didn't get any DHA, which is essential for proper development and plasticity and growth of the brain. But the mothers who breastfed, their babies did get it from them in the breast milk. And so there was another very important aspect that we had to deal at both WHO and FAO. I should tell you that at that time, I had moved from the Heart Institute into the office of the director of NIH, and I was given responsibility to coordinate and chair all the nutrition programs of the NIH. Following that, it expanded, and we included at that time all the agencies from the Department of Health and Human Services. So I coordinate the programs of all the institutes and of FDA and CDC. And then it was the time when McGovern in Congress, a long time ago, was working on dietary recommendations. And so we brought in USDA, and eventually I coordinated all the programs on nutrition research throughout the federal government. And the committee, because that was my job, and the committee operated out of the Office of Science and Technology Policy at the White House, because the science was very important. So following the meeting that we had 40 years ago, I, along with two others, edited the proceedings of the conference. And it was very obvious that NIH needs to develop various programs to look for answers to the questions that they were raised during the meeting. And that led to beautiful programs on nutrition research funded by practically all the institutes at the NIH. You know, child health focused a lot on mother's milk and growth and development, and cancer and heart disease, arthritis. So it was really very exciting times. And so I went back and reviewed all the data from the key studies, which was based on the 7-country studies and the diet of Crete turned out to be the healthiest diet than the diets in the United States, in Finland, in Holland, definitely it was very obvious that Keyes and his associates, in doing the 7-country studies, put all the emphasis on saturated fat and cholesterol and totally ignored the essential fatty acids because he was an epidemiologist and did not believe in them. So
Wow.
I thought I was going to review all the data that he had published, and became very obvious to me that they had totally ignored the omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acids and their functions, or the changes that had taken place in the food supply. And I began, although I have an MD degree and I'm a physician and did research at the NIH, I felt I had to know in detail the composition of the diet of Crete. And so I went to Crete, and there was a very good laboratory there, and we began to look at the ingredients and analyze the composition of the diet of Crete. And we found out that not only Keyes and company had completely ignored the essential fatty acids, but they also had several misinterpretations. So we felt that once we established the composition of the diet of Crete, the next thing we ought to do is to really begin to bring all this information to the attention of the medical community. So what became very obvious was the fact that the people in Crete ate a tremendous amount of green leafy vegetables. Green leafy vegetables are high in omega-3 fatty acids. So the ratio, they had a balanced ratio between omega-6 and omega-3s to begin with. And secondly, what was of extreme importance at that time, it was very important to show how much fish they ate. Because when Keyes did the studies and they translated the dietary history as to what people ate, the word for fish in Greek that they used was the one referring only to fresh fish. And of course, only at that time, only the part of the island that was at the seashore was the one where people ate a lot of fish. But what they ate a lot of was sardines and herring.
Okay.
And sardines and herring are very high in omega-3 fatty acids. So we prove it for once and for all that the factor that made the difference was not the cholesterol or the saturated fat, but it was a balanced ratio between omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acids. In other words, it's not only what they ate, but also what they did not eat, because they did not have any of the vegetable oils that are high in omega-6.
Okay.
So they had
And those are the seed oils.
a lot of leaf-green vegetables, a lot of fish, both fresh and preserved, and they had a diet that is very similar to the diet we evolved in. And that's why we went ahead and did the book, The Omega Diet. But I should also tell you that 2 years ago, I did another book for the public that is called The Healthiest Diet for You, Scientific Aspects, which is available for free to download online in English all over the world. And there are over 50,000 readings and downloads worldwide right now. And we're in the process of translating it. Actually, we have translated, publishing this summer in Greek and in Chinese, because the Chinese were the first to translate the Omega Diet. And so they're very interested, and now they finished the translation, and we're looking towards the publication for this summer. And
And
then,
Dr. Simopoulos, where can they get that book? Because I want everyone to know how to get that book. Where do they go?
okay, so the book online, they have to go and look at MDPI, that's the publisher, M
Okay.
as in MDPI, and then under my name, and then they will see how many people have read it, how many people have downloaded, and read the book, because I think knowledge is power. And
Absolutely.
you definitely need to have a public not only interested in a good diet, but particularly will go out and understand the mechanisms, because it's not that difficult. I mean, we have so much engineering and so many other very difficult things, and people learn. And so it looks like this. I don't know if
Okay.
you can see it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
I've
it
read
is
your
also,
PDF online.
yeah, because it is also on hardcover. So you can,
Okay.
if people want to buy the hardcover, they can buy it. But I wanted everybody who wants to read it, they can download it and get it for nothing. Because I really feel that the science is so strong and the
Right.
interest so big that we can no longer allow marketing to direct and try to tell you all kinds of stories as what you should eat.
I agree. And in fact, you sent a press release to the White House last March of 2005, did you not?
Yes.
Yes. I mean that is and I believe in that press release you really underscored the fact that this is a crisis. I mean,
It
this
is
is
a crisis.
causing
It's
it's a crisis.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because
And the
let
United
me,
States is the sickest country.
almost. I'm sure
Almost.
that some
Okay.
other countries elsewhere. But let me tell you what I think it's very important is the fact that you've got to understand a little bit of the history. How did we get here? How did we end up with high amounts of omega-6 and
Tell us how. Tell us how. I want to
being
hear that.
deficient in the omega-3s? We really are deficient in omega-3 fatty acids. And you have a ratio where it is very high, almost 20 to 1, and you have all these processed foods, and you have all this ultra-processed. Ultra-processed foods have a lot more omega-6 than omega-3s. Now, another thing I want to clarify for you is because people think that all seed oils are the same. It is not correct. The seed
Okay.
oils that are high in omega-6 fatty acids are cottonseed oil, sunflower oil, safflower oil, and soybean oil.
Okay.
Whereas oils like canola, they have a balanced ratio. They have equal amounts of omega-6 and omega-3. And so you can use canola to cook. And
Okay.
olive oil is mostly monounsaturated, has very small amount of omega-6 and traces of omega-3, but it is
Okay.
the high amount of monounsaturated fatty acids that helped the people in the diet of Crete. It's not really the fact only what they ate, but the people in Crete did not use any omega-6 oils. They did
Okay.
not use sunflower, where most of Europe uses sunflower, which is very
Right.
high, 80% in omega-6. So you have to be careful and you've got to know. And so in the book, we give you the composition. We tell you which oils you need to use, which ones to avoid, and how to do some of the special preparations. Now, the omega diet, which was published almost 24 years ago, every single recipe is balanced in the omega-6 and omega-3 and has been translated into 12 different languages all over the world.
Okay.
Yes, so the diet, the healthiest diet for you, the one that I did 2 years ago, we don't have recipes. I'm giving you information and ingredients and the history so that once you have that knowledge, you can modify your recipes. In other words, you don't have to change the way the foods how to cook them and so forth. All you need to do is make the changes necessary based on the information that's in the book.
Dr. Simopoulos, here's what I want to do. There's something I really want you to get into. We're going to take a real quick break. I want you to stay with me because when we get back, I want you to tell us what has happened. Why was this ignored? Why do we have such a high level of chronic diseases in our country? And what have been the barriers to get that education out? So we're going to take a break. Stay with me and go ahead and get something to drink. Get your notepad. Take notes because you're going to get an education. We'll be right back. Okay, folks, we've got Dr. Simopoulos. We are back. And Dr. Simopoulos, yes, let's tell the audience, Dr. Simopoulos, how we got where we got. I want you to tell us what is going on and why this information has been held back for 40 years.
Well, I don't think it has been held back, but certainly the people in the U.S., they get most of the information from advertising. Certainly, they don't get that much information, I think, when they are in high school or when they are in college, although there is a movement towards health and well-being, and I think things are changing. But let me tell you how we got to where we are today, why we have such a high ratio. To begin with, Procter and Gamble, about over 100 years ago, they began to make oil out of cottonseed oil. Now, also the soybean oil was another very popular one. What happened is these oils, until about 100 years ago, they were not used in food. They were commercial and industrial oils. But through technology, they learned how to bleach them, make them look like olive oil, and at the same time, they made them tasteless. They manipulate them chemically, and so you couldn't really taste them. For example, olive oil has a strong taste, but corn oil is bland. Sunflower oil is bland. Safflower oil is bad, and so on and so forth. And so they were very cheap to produce. They would last for a long time. They made lots of money, and they never studied their composition and what else they do. So that became very obvious, I think, about 40 years ago, because by then people began to study the ingredients and became very obvious that where during evolution people used a lot of fruits and vegetables, and they in certain parts they used olive oil because they had olive trees since time immemorial. And so in the U.S., for example, they did not use. When I came and I went to Barnard College at Columbia before I went to medical school because I studied chemistry, at that time people did not really use olive oil. They began to use mostly sunflower oil. Sunflower oil was very popular. Then they made margarines out of all these oils. So they ended up with a food supply that was very high in omega-6 fatty acids, because 80% of sunflower oil is omega-6. You don't want to use sunflower oil. You don't want to use safflower. You don't want to use corn oil. You to use any of the monounsaturates, like an avocado, or you can use olive oil, or you can use canola, so that this is, that was the beginning of excess production and inclusion of omega-6, and people did not eat fish. I remember when I first came, I had to go specifically to look and eat fish. So
Yeah,
they
that's
ate
true.
meat 2 or 3 times a day. But what had happened to the animals is that the animals now were grain-fed, and grains are full of omega-6 fatty acids. So
Yep.
when I had a piece of lamb in Greece that was grass-fed, it was very different in composition than the food I ate in college because that had been grain-fed. So you change then the oil composition. You change the composition of the animals. Then you had aquaculture and you changed the composition of the fish. You ended up in a situation where it's omega-3 deficiency and excess of omega-6 production. Now,
That makes
because of
sense.
the high amount of omega-6 then in the diet, in the body, the omega-6 oils are actually metabolized to hormone-like substances that are pro-inflammatory and pro-thrombotic. All the chronic diseases, obesity, diabetes, arthritis, cancer, cardiovascular disease the basis of the disease is inflammation.
Inflammation.
And,
Okay.
and this is all coming to us from the changes in the food supply. We evolved on a diet where there was a complete balance between omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acids. We never had this. And you can imagine now, this type of information, the people who produce processed foods and the people who produce, I would say, all these other compounds and they incorporate them into the food supply, they don't like to hear or to know that they should really make changes, that human
Right.
beings did not eat corn. Some people did, but the majority of people didn't.
No.
Yeah.
No.
So, but you see, we had a very good conference. The books the proceedings were published. The institutes at the NIH put out program announcements, and the research continued. So that today, not only we have proven repeatedly what was recognized 40 years ago, but there is enormous changes in terms of people themselves now are asking for the change because they have
Goodness.
seen. Yeah. See what happens, for example, if you eat an awful lot of omega-6, the omega-6 in the body are metabolized. And part of
Okay.
their metabolism goes to inflammation. But there are other components called the endocannabinoid system, which stimulates the appetite center in the brain. And so they have an enormous appetite, they cannot control it. So
Wow.
people have to learn these things, and make appropriate changes. It's very well known.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about the endocannabinoid system, and it does increase the appetite. This is so interesting because what you're teaching us, it's not just the 3, but the more 6 you have, the 3 and the 6 are both competing for the same enzyme. Is that right?
Well, they need a balance. Yeah, let me tell
Okay.
you. Because if you eat too much corn oil, you're going
Right.
to have too much of the omega-6 in the body
Right.
that's metabolized. Now, the omega-3s, for example, canola or flaxseed,
Yes. Okay.
they are also metabolized in the body, and the enzymes that they use for the metabolism are exactly the same. So they compete. During evolution, the omega-3s were stronger. And we had very little omega-6. People did not eat omega-6.
Right.
So what happened is now is if you have too much omega-6, there is not enough of, and the omega-6 are very aggressive. So they move faster and they form all these pro-inflammatory, they call them eicosanoids because they are from the Greek 20, meaning 20 molecule, 20 carbon atoms that are all of them pro-inflammatory. So not only then you end up with in the body producing inflammation, but they more or less suppress the metabolism of the omega-3s. So the reason we are deficient in omega-3 fatty acids is because we changed the food supply. Animals are grain-fed. Oils were industrial oils. People did not eat that.
Right,
And so you end up in a situation where you have excess production of omega-6. And omega-6, as I said, they increase the appetite. People eat more. They become obese. Obesity leads to cardiovascular disease and certainly to some forms of cancer, not all, and to diabetes and hypertension.
Let's talk about some of those diseases. Dr. Simopoulos, most of the people listening, I don't think they understand the enormity and the scope of the diseases that this low level of inflammation causes from the omega-6. Talk to us about some of those diseases, even like the autoimmune. Talk to us about those diseases.
Well, the point is that most of autoimmune diseases, they have a strong genetic component. So the presence of the genetic component, in medical terms, is diathesis, plus the fact that they are exposed to a pro-inflammatory environment, it's very easy to develop arthritis or to develop immune diseases because it's the combination of the genetic predisposition plus the fact that you are having too much inflammatory molecules circulating throughout our bodies and our brains.
Okay,
So,
and our brains. That's important for everybody to know that.
You have to start by changing the oils to begin with. I think it's very important because, I mean, just picture that. You have a lot of omega-6. Then they get a lot of the pro-inflammatory substances. The next thing that happens is that in the brain, the endocannabinoid system stimulates the appetite center. And so you eat more. So on the one hand, you have a lot of omega-6 and you have the inflammation. Then you have the endocannabinoid that increases your appetite. So
it's a perfect storm.
It's a terrible combination.
Yeah. And they all feed off of each other. No, I can definitely hear that. And I like the fact that you said brain, because I think a lot of people are misled, or they just maybe just admit in their minds that this high omega-6 and this very distorted ratio, when you've got this 15-1, 20-1, sometimes 25-1 or even higher, can cause a low level of neuroinflammatory processes in the brain, which can affect anxiety, depression, mood disorders, bipolar. I mean, I'm just giving all these, maybe even, I don't know, spectrum disorders.
Mental illness in general, okay?
Mental illness in general, right.
Is not helped by omega-6, where we have good evidence that some forms of depression, not all, because there are different forms, some forms of depression, they respond to omega-3 fatty acids. They're less depressed. Because if you're less depressed, you don't go around eating and
that's true.
Feeling miserable for yourself. I mean, depression is going to be the biggest problem in terms of normal lifespan.
Well, I've always said, a healthy brain begets a healthy body. I mean, it's just, I'm thinking you've got to have mental clarity and you've got to have a good sense of well-being about yourself in order to have a healthy body. I don't see too many people with mental illnesses that are going to naturally have a healthy body. I think I know they're inextricably intertwined through this nexus, but the brain is so, so important. And I want people to hear you talk about how important this fatty acid ratio is for the brain.
Well, again, the high fatty acid ratio in terms of high omega-6, it produces inflammation. inflammation interferes with normal metabolism of the brain. But
Okay.
it's not only that, it's the fact that the endocannabinoids, which are very powerful, they increase the appetite in a way where people become obese. Obesity
Yeah.
is at the very beginning of all the chronic diseases we're concerned about.
So
First
true.
you become obese, then you have heart disease, then you have cancer. Cancer of the breast is more common in women who are obese.
Overweight.
But
Yeah.
don't forget that if you have a family history, you should be extra careful to have a normal ratio or measure your ratio and then correct it accordingly. Because there are very good tests that they'll tell you, how much omega-6 you have in excess.
I
for
want to
that.
talk a little bit about the food companies. When you and I spoke a few weeks ago, you told me something I thought was fascinating. You said, everybody knows how much power and influence and money the drug companies have, the pharmaceutical industry. But I believe you said, Elizabeth, the food industry is even more powerful. I want you to talk about that.
Well, certainly the food industry, I'm not sure what it is today, but it used to be the biggest industry in terms of money.
Sure. Yeah.
In other words, because you take all the money that are used in agriculture and then food production, and then you move on into the not only foods but also beverages, because a lot of beverages are full of calories coming from sugar or
Absolutely.
yes, so that what you end up with is the food industry, I think, is very important. The food industry has to change. Or if the people begin to make changes, industry will change because they
That's
don't
true.
want to.
Yeah. From the ground up.
Right. So I think people ought to have a better education. I think the educational system ought to provide enough information about what is a proper diet, the importance of physical activity, the importance of mental health. Because how else can you be a healthy person if you are ignoring the basis upon which your life depends on?
Right. Right. And there's a lawsuit in California, and it's a first class action lawsuit against a lot of these big food manufacturers. And it's going to be interesting where that goes, but it's based upon the ultra processed foods and the damage that it's caused people. And I think that case is really going to set a precedence, and I'm hoping that might be a watershed and a bellwether to future cases. So we need as many forces and as many powers as we can get in order to change the food industry. The other day, Dr. Simopoulos, I was thinking of a grocery store, and you've got the perimeter, you've got the healthy food, you've got the produce on the perimeter. On the inside, which is 80%, you've got the processed foods out of a package.
Like they always did
The
that.
golden rule is don't. Yeah. So why don't we just flip that? Just like RFK flipped the pyramid, a few weeks ago. He flipped it pretty much upside down 180, which that should have been done a long time ago. We should do the same thing with the layout at the grocery stores and put all the 80% of the good food in the middle and 20% of the processed foods. Hard to get. It's logical.
The new dietary guidelines that came out are better than the previous ones. And in essence, they do emphasize healthy oils, which the
do.
previous ones did not. And they do emphasize the omega-3s. And then the report that came out in February about healthy children, they do refer to the work that I did in 2008 about the importance of omega-3s in cardiovascular disease, and they actually refer to that paper. So I know that they're trying to improve, but I think you should also take responsibility yourself. You've got
Absolutely.
You've got to start reading and understanding what is going on. Because
Absolutely. And in parallel with that, and this is a little off topic, but if we can get people's palates to change, we're so addicted to that sugar craving and that fat craving and the salt, the sugar, salt, and the fat. People love to eat that. And it's another subject, but there's kind of an addictive quality to that. And if we could retrain our palate, that would go a long ways as well. And we got to start when the children are young.
Remember, we have a very palatable commercial food supply. It tastes good. It looks good. They know how to attract your attention. And then they know what words to use that will stay in your memory. It's a whole business.
You said it.
It's a whole business.
It is.
Yeah. So if
they
you
even
really
take images of the brain. I heard that recently. They take images of the brain, and whatever food makes the reward system light up better. That's the food that they'll put in the grocery stores out of.
Yes.
Yeah. It's really sad. Dr. Simopoulos, we're out of time. I would love to bring you back on. This has been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I'm just amazed that we've actually got the godmother, the pioneer of the fatty acid omega-3 6 studies here, and she is a keynote speaker all over the world. I'm going to be following you, and anytime, I would love to have you back on, but thank you so much. You take care, and I'll be following you. And everybody, please get that book that she's talked about. She's already told you how to get that. It's free, and that's how passionate this wonderful doctor is. She wants everybody to read that book as education, and knowledge is power. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. My pleasure.
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.